Thank you so much for being here on a Sunday with such beautiful weather outside and choosing to be inside with us. I do want to start the program by inviting you guys to join me in an acknowledgement. We acknowledge with gratitude that we are able to gather together today in person, and we acknowledge that we gather on the land, the unceded land, to the Iroquois nations, the Montaukets, Manhassets, and the Shinnecock nations. With continued gratitude, may our continued gratitude and respect for the ancestral spirit of this land, as well as respect for each other, be the way forward. I am super excited to have Miss Monica Banks here. The core programming series here, Knowledge Friday, Insight Sunday, and Wellness Monday, is near and dear to us because it speaks to the community here. One, when I look out into the audience, I see people that I recognize and that I see week after week. You guys are the community. Two, the speakers are the community as well. And you guys are pretty awesome. You guys have all of this wonderful stuff. And Miss Monica is one of those. She is one of the warmest people that I've ever met. Super wonderful and spiritual and so compassionate. And I can throw all of these flowers at you. She is super, super nice to us here and as the staff on the church. Thank you. Thank you for seeing us, and thank you for always saying how much you appreciate the work that we do here. So thank you. Yes. No crying, because if you cry, I cry, and that's going to ruin my makeup. I would like to say that we are very, very grateful that you are in the Ark, and in addition to being in the Ark, she is also showing at the Sarah Nightingale Gallery as well as the Lieber Collection. So without further ado, Miss Monica Banks.
Well, okay, it's on, right? Okay. Thank you for coming. I am very honored to be in this show because I'm showing alongside many of my sculpture heroes who I've admired since the 80s, since before I or anyone thought of me as a sculptor. And I see people out in the world meet people they admire, celebrities, and they take these super awkward selfies. So that's what I did here. So this is me and Deborah Butterfield. I have loved her work. I saw every show she had at the Edward Thorpe Gallery in Soho, where I also actually followed everything April did lovingly. And what I learned from Deborah Butterfield is how to say everything you want to say in sculpture through an animal, like an animal that you have a feeling, like a visceral connection to. And also, I saw how she used material in such a creative way. She did, the branches and using parts of cars, but without a doubt, she created horses. They're amazing. The second one is, this is me and Brian Hunt. So Brian, I loved every show I saw. He was showing at Blumhelman. I saw everything in the 80s. He was showing these pieces, airships, that defied gravity and were so beautiful. And now that I even know him, because we're, here, neighbors, I have never asked him how he installs those pieces, because I want to just keep enjoying the magic of how they just seem to float. Number 3, the pieces from Pompeii. The artist Alan McCullum somehow convinced the Pompeii Foundation to let him recast or something the dogs from Pompeii, and the figures in Pompeii show kind of the moment between life and death. And they're life-size casts of humans and also this dog. This is the same dog repeated 3 times. The figures from Pompeii were exhibited in the IBM exhibition space in Midtown in the 80s, and they have stuck with me all these years. I also love that the casts were always left white. So here I am. We're next door neighbors. Oh, number 4, Kiki Smith. So they're her harpies. I like showing in the same show as Kiki Smith is really amazing. I remember seeing a piece, I think it was called Body and Soul at the Whitney when it was still in the old Breuer building. And it was a series of beautiful jugs with fancy writing, as though each jug was filled, well, God knows with her, it might have been. Each jug was filled with some kind of bodily fluid, starting with like tears and snot and saliva, and very female, going down through all the possible secretions. And I just thought like, oh my God, you can do that? It was so brave. And she kind of taught me about being personal and vulnerable and gross, but also beautiful. So that was very inspiring. And then finally, I forget. This is a super awkward selfie of me with Louise Bourgeois. And I think Louise Bourgeois must be the godmother of every 20th century woman sculptor. She just did everything. But I think the thing I really took away was that you can do work that processes like your family and your own story in a metaphorical way. And so obviously the spiders, they're genius. They stand on their own. You don't need to know the backstory, but knowing the backstory, kind of enriches the experience. So now I'm going to talk about the piece upstairs, Restless Things, and I'm going to tell you the whole backstory, the process of how this piece came to be. So for me, process is everything in sculpture. The work is very specific to my own life and the time and place that I'm working. And I use this process to kind of make sense of my life and the world around me, and I feel very lucky to be a sculptor and have this way of being in the world. So I made this piece during the summer and fall of 2024, remember? It was such a beautiful summer. Like a few piping plover babies survived, and there were lots of whales and dolphin sightings in the ocean. And then the autumn had the most spectacular sunsets ever. But I was definitely riding waves of existential despair leading up to the election. So I chose this time to make portraits of all the dead things in my collection. I had been collecting dead insects, dragonflies, butterflies, moths, houseflies. I just couldn't leave them there, so they just seemed important to hold on to. And of course, birds. When I find a dead bird, I make its portrait. The portraits are made out of porcelain. A lot of people have asked me, like, where's the bird? Like, does it die in the kiln? Okay, it's not a crematorium. It's a kiln. It's like, imagine someone drawing or painting your portrait. They don't cover you in paint. They look at you, and then the brains in your arms, your hands, do the work. Like, look, make, not slather. So each of these things is a portrait. And I can only work from life. I don't work from like illustrations or anything, because then the portrait would be flat. That's just the way I work. I only work in porcelain clay. It's the finest and whitest of all the clays, and it's the strongest, which is why like special fancy teacups and stuff are made out of porcelain. Okay. And it lends itself very well to when I make a lot of miniatures, and then there's like a lot of fine things in the subjects, and like that. And this clay works well for that. I leave these post-mortem portraits white. When they're air dried, they're crazy fragile, and I break a lot. But the ones that make it into the kiln, I fire them at about 2250 degrees, and that makes them solid, but they're still porous. And I leave them white because, white is, in many cultures, it's representative of death, and that seems appropriate. I like that you can see every detail, like you could see my fingerprints in these pieces. I like that you see like the gesture and the feeling of it. And then I choose not to glaze the pieces because, well, for one thing, glaze adds thickness, and I want it to be as fine as possible. And also, glaze, I don't want to add color. I don't feel like I should be like having fun with color at their expense. I feel like this is the most respectful way to leave the portraits just pure white. And it also kind of reminds me of bone. So yeah, why do I collect dead things, and why do I love birds so much? I don't know. I mean, like a dead dragonfly is like jewelry. I mean, it's just the most beautiful thing, iridescent, and I think that everything that was alive deserves to be honored. But I especially love birds, and So I love birds, and that led me to kind of read some books, learn a little something about this visceral connection I have to them. And it turns out that birds and I actually have a lot in common. Birds are actually dinosaurs who have been evolving for millions of years. And humans have been evolving, not quite as long. So humans have been evolving to have giant heads and giant brains to solve problems. Birds have been evolving to be super light and nimble and be able to fly to avoid problems. And I too am very motivated by avoiding problems. I think I might be part bird. Okay, birds get up early, I get up early. Some birds, like the New Caledonia crows, not only use tools, but they invent their own tools. And I'm a sculptor. I use tools every day, and sometimes I have to create the thing in order to achieve my goal. And birds, we always think of how birds nest and how they lovingly create their homes. And even like the bower birds that are known for like their really flamboyant mating rituals, we still call them bower birds because of where they build their homes. So I love that. So I am a total homebody. I spent a lot of the pandemic rearranging velvet cushions on a gray couch. So these birds who, yeah, we have a lot in common. Okay. So judging by the piece upstairs and a lot of my work, you might think I only like dead birds, but I actually like live birds. I love live birds. And they give me so much joy and delight every day. I'm absolutely in awe of them. So in addition to this work, I also make outdoor glazed sculpture designed to like return the favor. So I want the birds to be delighted and have joy. Maybe they have enough already, but I want to participate in that. So I make outdoor like tea parties, like cakes and teacups, and I fill them with seed and water, and then I videotape to see if any of the birds interact with it. And I have like thousands of hours of video, but I I edit them down to the good parts, and I post them on YouTube. No, on Instagram and also Vimeo. But anyway, so this is one of the clips that I put on Instagram. I think. Forward, right? Okay.
And you may ask yourself, how do I work this? And you may ask yourself, where is that large automobile? And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful house. And you may tell yourself, this is not my beautiful wife. Letting the days go by, let the water hold me out. Letting the days go by, water flowing by.
So that was one of the early ones, and I have to say, when that bird sipped water out of that teacup, I thought I was going to burst into tears. This is like the most tender thing in the world. So that's, just life-size, like cake and little teacups in my garden. And so this next one this is how I celebrated the 4th of July. I set out a buffet of porcelain cakes filled with seed and water and just watched the shenanigans. And then, I add the music later. They're not doing this. They don't know who Katy Perry is, but.
Like a lightning bolt, your heart will glow, and when it's time, you just gotta ignite the light and let it shine. Just on the night, like the 4th of July.
And then this last one's very short. It's how I celebrated the first day of autumn. And I wanted to see whether the birds would engage with this little setup. But I treated them to some suet and peanuts because, it's a holiday, first day of autumn. I love autumn. I don't know. It just cracks me up. Okay, so back to this piece. So you know that I found all those insects and I found all those birds, although occasionally a friend will bring me a bird. But, I only work from life, and I never did find an owl. But, so I'll tell you how I got a dead owl as a model. My good friend, Lori Lambrecht, friend to many, took some of my videos and my work and sent them out of the blue to a friend of hers, Cheryl St. Ange in New Hampshire, because Cheryl is a bird person too. And Cheryl responded right away, "Tell Monica I have an owl in the freezer if she wants it." That is a good friend, and a good friend of a friend. So, needless to say, I rigged up a cooler full of ice. First, I prepared by buying a bird freezer, which is just you can't buy that at P.C. Richards. You have to just buy a regular freezer and devote it to the birds. Because I knew it would take me a while to make the owl. I would have to, I'd have to be able to preserve it and go back to it over and over. So I drove up to New Hampshire and picked up the owl and brought him home. And the owl was so intimidating because he's not like a bird. He's like first of all, he's very light, and he's like a fluffy puppy. And he's got these feathery, like drumstick legs. He has these little velvety kitten paws. He's got this big giant baby head with big giant baby eyes and like a nose like maybe someone I might be related to. And and so I just started making the owl. It's very hard to make fluff out of porcelain, but I just wanted to honor this magnificent creature, and you can see that I make multiples of everything. It's not because I want to have a lot of, birds with their heads torn off or whatever. It's just that I'm trying to get it right. I want to honor these magical creatures who bring so much awe and beauty into the world. So I just keep doing their portrait over and over. I never feel like I've gotten it right. I always feel like the next one is going to be better and I'll get closer to what they really look like. But I never really reach that. Generally, I just get a new model and start working on the next thing. So the sight of a dead bird is just the most poignant thing to me, and I'm just driven to honor their existence. But these postmortem portraits do something else for me. They kind of allow me to like heal. I don't know if everyone has this, but I have this sorrow that I feel as a human on the planet and as an American and as a daughter and as a Jew. So I have this place to go with all of that, and I feel grateful that I have the time and facility to do that. I was at a funeral a few weeks ago, and the rabbi was explaining that tending to the body of a deceased, in his case, person, is like the greatest. It's the greatest favor you can do for someone. It's the greatest kindness by showing them dignity and care. And he said it's the greatest kindness because normally if you do something for someone, they can do something nice for you, or they can at least thank you. But in the case of the deceased, they can't do that. And I only learned this a few weeks ago, but it just resonated so deeply with me. It just feels true and right, and so I feel like maybe this is my way of treating the birds and the beings with dignity and care, and kind of thanking them. So now I've been doing this for several months. These exact pieces, well. Several weeks anyway, and it's now late fall of 2024, and I'm at the ocean beach. I pretty much start and end every day at the ocean, and I notice for the 30th time the butterflies in their crazy way waggling their way down the beach, and they look like they don't know what they're doing, and some of them look like they're going backwards, but I remember that they're migrating. They're migrating from Canada to Mexico, and their crazy path perpetuates the species every year. And every year in the fall, it fills me with hope that, if they can do it, there's hope for all of us. So inevitably, there are a few butterflies left on the ground, and I take them home, and I started making their portrait. And I was trying to hold on to this feeling of hope. Now, this is fall, October of 2024, and I'm just turning out dozens of these butterflies. And as I was, so over the time I was making these pieces, I would unload the kiln and kind of place the pieces different places. But I do have this table, this kind of base next to the kiln where I was kind of arranging the birds and the insects and the owls especially, because they take up a lot of room. And when it came to adding the butterflies, I really wanted the butterflies not to be lying down the way they were found, like the other models. I wanted them to be standing up as though they were alighting among these dead creatures. I had this kind of surge of spirituality that I'd never really felt in this way before, that the butterflies were going to carry the spirits or what was essential in all these corporeal beings, all us corporeal beings, forward into the future, that kind of everything was going to be okay. So that's why most of the butterflies are standing, you'll see when you go upstairs. So fast forward, back to reality, and Eric reaches out to me and tells me about the show he's curating, and says, do I have any new work? And so I did what any artist does. I vacuumed, and then I took out like some finished pieces. These are a couple of them. And he looked at them, and we sat and talked and stuff. And then he got up and wandered to the back of my studio, and he saw this, and he said, oh, this could be a piece. And and I didn't, I was only thinking of it as my process and kind of arranging things. But when I saw it through his eyes, I thought, like, yeah, I guess it is. And so that's how it ended up here. And this is the piece, Restless Things. The end.
Thank you, Monica. Would we like to open up the floor for questions? Are there any questions? Anyone have any questions? It's April.
We have a
I'm
ringer
coming.
here. You're telling
You
me.
weren't here yesterday for the talk with Edwina and Frank Cavedo and me, were you, by any chance?
I wish I was. I was home boring Phil to death.
It's okay. I don't. It's fine. I just bring it up because I think you'll appreciate this. Frank told a story about an old Banneker guy that used to go and work in Amagansett and Napeague. And they were working out there doing clamming and stuff like that. And they saw on the horizon a weird kind of fog, what looked like a fog bank, but it had a kind of a weirdish yellowish color. And so he told the pilot of the boat, I want to go out there and see what the hell that is, because they thought it might be smoke and something on fire. I mean, they were really puzzled by it partly because of the coloration. And when they got up to it, it was all monarch butterflies. And I kind of lost my mind when he said that, because I was like, oh my God, what would you do to see that? And then he immediately said, and you'll never see that again because of where we're at with life on Earth right now. So I mention this partly because I think that your work is a profoundly beautiful labor of love. And I also think it's a threnody for the moment that we're in. And I just thank you for the emotionality of it. And also just, to remind everybody, everybody has to do something to prevent what's going on from continuing. And nobody from the government is going to do it now. So it really is up to people on an individual level to stop with the pesticides, the fertilizers, that, just stop, and let things grow. Because this is, your work is just so positive and so beautiful and inspiring. I hope that it inspires other people. And I love the way that you did this talk so much. It was so funny and so poignant at the same time. Thank you. I guess I'm not asking a question. Would you, how about...
It's okay, you're warming everybody up.
I got one. What are you working on now, Monica?
Well, it's funny. I actually started making portraits of flowers. I don't, honestly, I had done one for a piece that I never used, and Sarah Nightingale, where I show and down on Main Street, said, oh, can you make more flowers? And we could show these. I'm like, no. But then, of course, I did it, because most of you know that I'll always say no, and then I always do it. Whatever, except you. That's my husband. So I started making portraits of flowers. And then I saw the Hilma, we're a little off subject, but I saw the Hilma Af Klint show.
Hilma Af Klint.
Klint, oh, yeah, I know, you can't get that wrong. And her drawings, they're portraits of real flowers with, where the bugs, the insects, nibbled away and stuff. And so that was inspiring. But I actually have been making some flowers. But I'm desperate to get back to these, honestly.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because the other thing that kept popping up yesterday in this kind of general ecological term, we called the talk yard arc. So it was about
love
how
it.
to kind of make your yard an arc that would help save things. But the one thing that kept happening is that birds would come up, and then caterpillars would have to come up, and then flowers would have to come up, and the whole thing was so interconnected. It just, everything bounced off of everything else. So you're the sensitive being who's like taking things in and then making the connections without necessarily scientifically, saying, well, let's see, we need to have flowers because we need to have caterpillars be made from butterflies that mate, and then they'll feed the birds, and it goes on and on and on. But I think you're just so in tune with that. Do you think you're so in tune with that that's why it's
That's a
happening?
question. I think a lot of science makes intuitive sense. That's all I can say to that. Is that enough? Okay.
I have not a question.
Eric?
In a way, I actually think that the way you just showed us your process and your feeling, thinking process and stuff, questions are irrelevant to it. But what there is are more observations and additions to things you talked about. And in that regard, I followed your work for many years, and I first saw it when you were doing these, sort of yummy-licious layer cakes of, beautiful pastel colors and whatnot, and with, from a distance, they were, gorgeous little things decorating the desserts. And when I went up to see them closer, I saw that you had reinterpreted Rodin's Gates of Hell in this incredibly brilliant, ironic way, which was because all of the things that I thought were, little flowers and whatever that decorated were all screaming people falling into the depths of, their eternal damnation.
I feel so
on this
seen.
incredibly sweet thing, right? I mean, the perversity of that should have shown me where you would go, but it didn't, obviously. And it was what the observation I have about this work is that you went from a way of dealing with tragedy and anger, emotion, and complexity of life in a truly, ironic, comic, ironic form, to a real reverence and for the deep tragedy of which is an inevitability of life itself, right? That it's a life and then it's a death and there's in between and stuff. And so to shift your making to an observational platform as opposed to simply ideational execution, I think, to me, it took on a level of bravery in confronting the bigger problems, the bigger questions in life and stuff like that. And so, to have you in the show with this piece, which in that area that you're in, I sort of feel like is the archaeological, artist's approach to animals as an archaeological, historical rediscovery kind of feel, of which something like this just fits so eloquently in and poignantly. So I just want to add that to our non-questioning.
Well, thank you for that interpretation. I have to say, I didn't really know what to do. I just was driven to make these pieces, and I didn't really know what to do with them. That's why, like the previous, those finished pieces that I showed you, that I just showed a second ago, I felt like I had to like make them into something because, anyway, thanks.
Monica, we have a question over here.
Hi, Monica.
Hi,
Thank
Jill.
you for your
All ringers.
your beautiful talk. It's so interesting what Eric said, because I was going to say that so many years ago, I bought one of your pieces with the dead bodies in a diet. What is it called?
It's in a shadow box.
In a shadow box, and I was thinking about the transformation of those bodies to the birds and the butterflies and the owls, and I was really taken with that. To me, first of all, the title of the piece, Restless Things, really speaks to me because, they're not alive, right? And yet they're restless, as if they still want to be alive, or they're alive in another realm. So I found that really beautiful. But I was also interested in the way in which you moved from, the dead bodies, which I felt for me were so reminiscent of the Holocaust. I don't know if that's true.
I kind of hid behind like all the other like political tragedies and natural tragedies that were happening in the moment that really did inspire that series of. So they're very miniature human bodies, largely inspired by the figures from Pompeii, kind of in between the moment between life and death, or else just unidentified, anonymous victims of human and natural caused tragedies. That's the piece and the series that Jill's referring to. That was, again, I was furiously, it started with the healthcare conversation. Are Americans entitled to health care, or should they just die when they get sick? And I was listening to all these stories on NPR about people who couldn't afford their treatments. And I started making figures and kind of like reenacting, like tearing off an arm, like what happened to you? And then like having it like lie, and then I would ask the figure, like, what happened to you? So I was a very big NPR devotee at the time. Then 2010, this earthquake happened in Haiti, and suddenly there were thousands of unidentified anonymous victims of this tragedy, and that just brought up the whole history of that, including the Holocaust, which, I am Jewish. It's in my DNA. So, yeah. So, you could just keep going. All of history is populated with that backstory.
Thank you.
I don't need the mic, thank you. I'm going to go way back to another tragedy. What happened to that amazing piece you did right after 9/11? The one you had hanging in your
you saw that.
studio.
I could never get anyone to show it.
Wow.
That was actually, I don't have any photos of it, but I was still working in steel, doing freehand drawings in steel bar. I would heat with an oxyacetylene torch and just draw freehand. And when 9/11 happened, I was processing. Well, for one thing, I had 2 little kids in the house, so I had to do all processing in my studio alone during nap time. So I was processing the victims of 9/11, and particularly, it was so gruesome. I'm sure most of you remember. There were body parts falling out of the, in the debris and in the buildings, and people jumping, and I was kind of imagining people's like last day of work. They didn't know, of course, it was their last day, and so I made like a half a woman with a lovely skirt and kitten heels because she was going to work that day and she was going on a date after work, and like an arm with a dress shirt and the cuff and cufflinks because and I hung them in my studio as though they were falling out of the sky. Believe it or not, no one wanted to show this piece. I still have it, most of it, but thanks for reminding us. Yeah. Hi, Sherry.
Hi, Monica. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
You?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. I was interested, this is in a more of a formal concern and consideration of your work, which is just about surface. And I wondered if you might even be able to go backwards an image or two and then show this one again, because it seems to me that the surface of the work has evolved a little bit in terms of the, from here to the current works, there is a surface of decay that is not as viscerally present. It's implied but not present in the works that came out of like the domestic wares and the cakes and things like that. So I was wondering if you might speak to that a little bit.
Like of these pieces?
Yeah, I mean, is it just simply that they are fired differently and that they have a more of a glaze? The glaze?
I was going for cake, like the texture of cake, and also the glaze. I figured out that if I use a matte glaze, but I fire it at a high temperature, it was really glossy, like icing. Thank you. And I had to do a lot of research on that, and a lot of tubs of icing got consumed. But yeah, like the piece on all the way to the left is kind of decrepit, and I have one that I think of as like the Miss Havisham cake, which yes has some decrepitude to it, and I don't know, I just always go to that. It's just not my natural. That's my baseline. Yeah. Does that answer your question? I think so. Okay. Yeah.
Monica, I have a quick question-y comment.
Yeah.
So as you're talking and as Jill mentioned, the Restless Things, it's interesting because it's dead birds that you very much, or that still feel alive. And as I'm listening to you talk about all of your other pieces, you're talking about the anonymous victims of the tragedies and imagining what happened to you and the people at 9/11 and where they were there during their day. And I'm curious, as you're creating, I know that you are, with the Restless Things, you are looking at the object and creating like one-to-one, sort of trying to get it right, which you've expressed to me previously. But are you thinking about the life of that bird as you're creating and the animation of the butterflies on the beach? And are you thinking about that life form, like the activity and the animation of it as you're creating?
Well, I make up stories about all my subjects. I give them all genders. I just make it up. I'm not a scientist. I wouldn't know how to tell the sex or whatever the right word is. I wouldn't know how to tell, but I do, like the owl's a boy, and the bird with its head torn off was the female. And
Are these stories happening while you're creating, or are they post-production?
I'm just like at one with them in their current state. I tell myself these stories sometimes just to tell Phil about it, like oh, that owl, he's giving me so much trouble. I think I'm really just with them in their current state when I'm actually making it, and it's, like the brains in my hands just kind of take over. And my head, I generally am listening to a book on, like audiobook, to kind of, I don't know, to just take up part of my brain so that I can just be with it in its current state. But I guess then when I'm moving them around, I assign some, some of them to me are babies. And there's like the tiniest bird I ever had that my friend Amy gave me is there. And but I'm really just there with them. Yeah.
Hi. It's not a question, but an observation. I know that the butterfly is an emblem of the soul in many cultures.
Oh.
And when I look at this piece and I see those butterflies, it's so visceral that they're alighting, and it's like they're giving reverence to the birds that are dead around them. And I feel like that dichotomy between the soul that they're bringing to the birds is so incredibly powerful. That's it.
Thank you. I actually I didn't know that about butterflies. To learn more.
Just a visual question. I can't imagine you would be doing this in a closed environment. Do you have big windows when you work on something like that, of nature, that you kind of have the light and whatever? Or are you more in like I don't know what your studio looks like, but I'm just curious.
Oh, it's beautiful. I've big windows up high, and then I'm surrounded. It's a separate building in our backyard, so I'm surrounded by a garden and a little area, gravel area. Yeah, who said that? Yeah, but it's a beautiful place to sit, and in East Hampton. Well, there's nowhere more beautiful than this. Right?
Are there any further questions for Miss Monica?
Miss Monica.
All right. Thank you, Monica.